for this kind of, startup type of venture, you need to be almost, not knowing all the obstacles in front of you, because if you did, you probably would just pick something a lot easier. But I think that's to our advantage in a way, because we're willing to do the things that other people won't do or haven't built into their business to allow them to do.
This is Evolve CPG's Brands for a Better World podcast, featuring purpose-driven leaders who not only believe in better, but actively pursue it. That's better products, better brands, and better leadership for a better world. Thanks to you, our listeners, this podcast is now ranked in the top 10% of all podcasts globally. Let's not stop there, though. You can help us reach more people by taking a moment to leave us a rating or review, which is critical for podcast algorithms, and by sharing your favorite episodes with your network. The more people we reach, the more good we can bring about in this world. If you work in the industry, you can also join our online community where we're going further, faster, together at community.evolvecpg.com. I'm your host, Gage Mitchell, founder and creative director of Modern Species, a sustainable brand design agency helping better brands grow and scale their impact. On this episode, we're speaking with Alec Jaffe, founder and CEO of Alec's Ice Cream, about how he stumbled into the joys of making ice cream as a kid, the benefits of A2 dairy, what makes his ice cream so creamy and delicious, how his hunt for organic dairy led him to becoming Regenerative Organic Certified, and more.
Hey, I'm Alec Jaffe, founder, CEO of Alec's Ice Cream. We are the world's first and only certified regenerative organic ice cream made with gut-friendly A2 dairy.
Awesome. And I'm excited to dig a little bit more into what the A2 thing is in a little bit. But before we start there, I was poking around in your background and noticed that after school, you started out working in like sports entertainment and sponsorships. And I know I'm pretty sure you played college like football or something like that as well. So was that your original plan A for your career, was go into sports in some way?
Yeah. I mean, sports have been a part of my life for as long as I can remember. And I played football at USC in college. And after that, the natural thing was to go work in sports. So I worked at AEG, Anschutz Entertainment Group, doing some corporate sponsors, account management type stuff for some things like the LA Kings, Staples Center, LA Live, the LA Galaxy. So pretty cool. And then after working there for a little bit, wanted to branch out from the sports world and try some other things. So then went to go work in tech at a small startup. And then that led me to eventually getting into the ice cream game. Not the most straight line path, but that was I guess how I got here.
Well, that's part of why I asked too, is because it's pretty rare, I would say, for people that I interview that have had a straight line in their path. It's not like there's very few people who went to school for CPG entrepreneurship or something like that and ended up starting a CPG company. It's usually like, oh, I was over on this field, or I had this experience, or I, whatever, I got laid off, and then I went back to my comfort zone of like baking cookies or something. It's always some story like that. But I do, and we'll get more into your product in a little bit, but one of the nuances that I thought was interesting is usually I feel like the athletes or people who are super health focused before starting a CPG company usually end up launching like a protein version of food, or a high fiber or a low sugar or something like that. So I'll be interested to hear as the story develops why ice cream. But speaking of why ice cream, I was looking at your website and saw that your kind of love of ice cream, or your entrepreneurial journey, kind of started when you were in elementary school. It sounded like you did some school project where you had to make your own ice cream or something. Can you talk about that project, like why ice cream and how that came about?
Yeah. The why, I don't know if I could answer why I chose ice cream for that project, but basically the project was make something at home, bring it into class to present how you made whatever thing. And I chose to make ice cream. There was no, it just, I don't, for whatever reason, I picked that. And so that was just a hobby that I had growing up. And yeah, I mean, I've always loved ice cream. It was always the dessert of choice in our household. Our freezer was always stocked with ice cream growing up. It's something that, after dinner, it's like, okay, so who wants some ice cream? And so it was just kind of a staple of my childhood growing up.
Okay, so it could have just been, oh, it's a staple of my childhood, and so I could probably figure out how to make it. Or
Yeah.
like, did your parents know how to make ice cream? It was like,
No.
there's some background that you knew it was even possible to make it? Because I feel like when I was a
No.
kid, I would have seen ice cream and been like, that must be some magic wizardry that only people in a factory or with magic skills can make. So how did you know that you could even make it? Did your parents help you figure that out? Maybe it's probably hard to remember now.
Yeah. No, I honestly, all I remember is going to the store and buying a Cuisinart ice cream maker, like a little one. You had to put it in the freezer 12 hours before you could make 1 pint of ice cream. It's a really not time efficient process. I bought a cookbook that just had some basic recipes and tell you how to make a French custard style base. And so I was, a little kid on the
Nice.
stove top stirring up my custard base and everything. I made peppermint stick flavor for my flavor that I brought into class. Um, and I remember vividly like not being super confident in my egg cracking skills at that point in my life. And so I was in class having to like crack the egg and, drop the egg yolks into the bowl to show how you make the mix. And I was like, oh shoot, I don't really just kind of like smashed the egg on the side of the bowl. Little kid cooking
Anxiety,
skills.
yeah.
Yeah. And so yeah, I was like, oh God, how do I separate
Wow.
an egg yolk in front of everyone?
Yeah,
And
that's pressure. It's not just make
yeah,
something at home and bring it in, but then you had to demo it at school
yeah,
too. So that's extra
exactly.
level skill.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, but yeah, definitely no one had, like, I wasn't surrounded by a family of ice cream makers, and, yeah, so that's kind of how I got started there. But food was always a big part of my family's life and growing up and everything like that. So, yeah, something I was always around. Uh,
Yeah, I think there was something about of finding like a love for sustainability as well, like playing on a relative
yeah,
or friend's farm or something. How did that tie in? And was that kind of part of the school project too? Or are you making like sustainable ice cream or like organic or
no,
local or something like that? Or is that like a separate story thread?
yeah. Um, so for the sustainability part of it, my aunt and uncle, actually, my uncle was a professor of agroecology at UC Santa Cruz, and they had this small dry farm vineyard and ranch in the Central Valley of California. And so we did family reunions every Thanksgiving there growing up. And so every year we'd go and, I'd be in this environment and, of course it's close family members that's their life's work. And so they're always talking about it. So you're always hearing about these things and topics and talking about soil health and topsoil and rainwater retention and, water levels in the aquifer in the ground and, all these topics that 20 years ago people weren't, that wasn't like a common conversation that people were having and talking about
Yeah.
sustainability and climate. So that is definitely was just something that I was always around. I never really thought about it as much other than just something that I felt was important and was told was important, and was a common topic of conversation. And so as I started to transition and looking at food, I was just looking and, always in even just my buying habits when I was shopping for myself at the grocery store, just realizing how little options there are for sustainable foods and foods that are doing better for the planet. Um, And so as I started to think about making an ice cream company, what excited me was that there seemed to be no company that delivered really amazing, unique, delicious flavors and also talked about sustainability and food systems and the impact of our food on our planet and climate.
Yeah, that's true. So I guess quick before we nerd out in the ice cream business. So your family had a strong food culture, and then this uncle obviously had something to do with sustainability and agriculture. But did your family growing up also in that food culture? Was there a sustainability or a health or anything like that kind of focus in your family culture growing up?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would describe it as like, the early organic shopper. Everything was organic. I don't think back then there wasn't really anything else that you knew other than buy the organic thing because it's better. Not really even maybe fully understanding why.
Yeah,
But
totally.
yeah, but buying everything organic and just talking about, eating clean and everything like that. And then with my athletics experience too, eating healthy was a huge part of my life. And just trying to make sure, because I needed to gain weight for football, but I needed to gain like healthy weight and good weight and put on muscle and everything. So, yeah, it was a big thing for us was eating clean and eating healthy, but eating good foods as well. And I think when you brought up, oh, I'm surprised it wasn't like a protein or a low calorie version. I think for me, ice cream was never a functional, just, I wasn't eating ice cream to meet my protein macros for the day.
Yeah.
Ice cream was my cheat meal. So that was, yeah. And we can get into more of that in a little bit, but yeah.
That makes sense. I mean, I generally eat fairly healthy and cook most of all my own food, but I allow myself those like, okay, I know this is unhealthy, but I'm only eating it like a little bit like a couple times a week or something like that. So no need to force every single thing you're eating to become like the source of all your nutrition. Totally feel you there. That makes sense. So you kind of had something of a healthy eating and a little bit of an agricultural background growing up, at least more than maybe some other folks might. And then you went off into sports for a little bit and then into tech. And then at what point were you like, you know what, I need to start a food business and like remember that you loved ice cream and sustainability? Like what was that trigger moment that launched you towards starting your own brand?
So the startup that I was at was shutting down or in the process of shutting down. And I just was thinking about what I wanted to do next with my life. And I had this bug to try and, start something, figure out something that I wanted to do. And I was playing around with a bunch of different ideas, both software, food, and other consumer products, and just really in a very experimental phase of just trying a bunch of different ideas, making prototypes, doing a lot of customer type research. And as I was doing that, making these prototypes, making these samples and things, getting really in depth with that process, I just started to fall more and more in love with the process of making ice cream and refining the recipes and taking really in detail notes on, well, if I change the amount of cream by this much, like what happens? Or if I change the amount of egg, so on. So from that point, I just really fell in love with it because I'd never done it to that serious of a level until that point in my life. And I just decided I just kept working on it, kept making recipes that people really loved for friends, family, neighbors, things like that. And decided, all right, people really like this and they're excited about it. Let's see if I can turn this into a business.
Nice. Okay. Yeah. So And then that's when, the childhood love and the passion of sustainability kind of crept back in. But you also mentioned
Mm-hmm.
that you were doing a little market research and it felt like there was no company that was out there really crushing quality of like taste and flavor, unique flavors, but then also going deep in that sustainability focus. And definitely hear you there. Like one of our clients at Modern Species is Alden's Organic Ice Cream, and they are one of the few organic ice creams left on the market. But because they're already more expensive, they can't do like the super crazy, different, unique flavors all the time. They just have to kind of keep some of the staples because they can't go for premium, flavor profiles and add the premium of the organic dairy. So knowing that and we've also worked with Organic Valley quite a bit over the years too. So knowing that like the dairy industry itself is having various struggles of the drop in American consumption of things like milk, which is also putting a higher price on getting organic dairy or whey or anything else like that for your products. And I think you launched relatively recently, so you were launching into this like kind of unknown dairy world. So how did you I guess justify to yourself like, I'm going to go in this industry that's sort of struggling and I'm going to make not only premium flavors and unique flavor profiles, but also go deeper than organic and get regenerative organic certified, which I imagine there's not a ton of supply of that, right? So you put all these constraints on yourself. I appreciate it because I love unique flavors and I love sustainability and regenerative organic. So I'm a big fan of what you're doing, but from a business standpoint, I'm like, holy shit, how is he pulling this off? So how did all that come to be? Like, how did you find a way to do it when most other companies are struggling to figure out that path?
Yeah. I think being naive enough to try it is a big one.
Totally.
If you were looking at it from a super experienced person in the industry and, doing all the math and calculating it all from the from the like concept phase, you'd probably be like, this is difficult. I'm going to pick something else. And I think that's for a lot of things you need to, for this kind of, startup type of venture, you need to be almost, not knowing all the obstacles in front of you, because if you did, you probably would just pick something a lot easier. And, but I think that's to our advantage in a way, because we're willing to do the things that other people won't do or haven't built into their business to allow them to do.
Right.
So, that's just how we are approaching it. And our whole mission of how we do things with our products is we want to make the best quality products possible, but without sacrificing our values and our standards for our sourcing and just how we do things. So, I mean, we just figured it out.
Just jump in. Yeah. I mean, I've had a lot of the conversations about that recently, about how important it is to not know too much before you dive in. Because so many people say, like, if I knew everything I know now, like, let's say 10 years into running their business, or like they say they would have never started the business they did, but they're thankful they didn't know that much because they got in and did something other people weren't going to do because they knew too much and they weren't going to take that risk, right? And I think maybe part of it too is if you were a legacy ice cream company and decided to level up to regenerative organic, or decided to level up your flavor profiles, and you have to go into a retailer and convince them that you're going to double your prices or whatever else, those retailers are just going to laugh at you and say, no, I don't think so. You can take your products and go elsewhere if you're going to try to do that. Especially during this recent kind of inflationary period, I heard that retailers were drawing some hard lines on not wanting price increases to come through the door. So, but by launching a new brand, you were able to come to them with something that was like, hey, this is a premium regenerative organic, awesome flavor profile company, and take a risk on it, like, whereas if you were trying to change what you were already doing, it would have been hard, change UPCs, change your retailer minds, et cetera. So I think part of it's, that naivete of like just not knowing all the problems you're going to face, but also starting from scratch is often helpful too, I think.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we didn't have anything to compare against with our product, from like a earlier version or like another line of products. So it definitely was an advantage.
Yeah. Um, what I know one of the things you talk a lot about on your website, and you mentioned it at the top of this kind of interview too, is this idea of A2 dairy. So even though I've worked with dairy brands for a long time, multiple ice cream companies and milk companies and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what A2 dairy is. So that was a new one on me. So I'd love like an explanation
Yeah,
from you, because I imagine lots of other people listening don't know what it is. So what is A2 dairy and why is it better?
yeah. So A2 dairy, it's super exciting. The headline is it's uh, dairy that's easier to digest for many people. It's It's A2 is a beta casein protein, so it's a milk protein found in all mammals' milk. Cows produce this protein naturally as well. A long time ago, some cows started producing a variant of that protein called an A1 protein, and that A1 protein has been linked to a lot of dairy sensitivity symptoms and issues for people. So I like to say there is a common misconception is that A2 dairy means that there's no lactose in it, which that's
Mm,
not true. Lactose is not being removed. Um, what's allowing people to comfortably enjoy the A2 dairy is having that A2 protein versus a lot of milk products and dairy products that you're buying are a combination of A1 and A2 uh, milk because it's someone who's just getting a bunch of milk from a bunch of different sources, and there's not no genetic testing confirming that the herds are producing 100% A2 dairy, and so um, yeah, that's just
okay.
that's kind of the high level. It can get really sciencey really quick. And so, if you are someone who has perceived lactose intolerance or dairy sensitivities, I'll say give it a try, see how it goes. And we've had a ton of people who have come up to us and said, I haven't been able to eat ice cream in years because it always hurts my stomach or makes me feel horrible, and I feel amazing after eating your ice cream.
Wow, that's awesome. And so is it so it sounded like it's like a different cow breed or genetic line that produces this type of protein. And then so if you're just picking out or sourcing your dairy from a farm that only has those cows, then all
Mm-hmm.
your milk is A2, or are you having to like test each batch and send some away if it's not A2?
So it has to do purely with the genetics of the cow. It's not specific breeds. Like a lot of people say, oh, it's Jersey milk, so that means it's A2. That's not necessarily true. Jerseys can also have that A1, those A1 genetics as well. Um, but yeah, certain breeds are more likely to have the A2 genetics, and some are more likely to have the A1 genetics. So it's really up to the farm to then be just doing a simple genetic test, usually with like a hair sample that you send into a lab, and just to confirm if the cow has the A2 is producing A2 dairy or A1 dairy.
Interesting. Okay, cool. So you not only found organic dairy source, but a regenerative organic dairy source and one that can give you A2 specific milk. That must have been
Yeah.
a challenge finding that supplier, or is it like a farm that you own? Is it your family's farm or something like that?
No, we partner with Alexander Family Farms to source all of our dairy, and we it was pretty lucky just finding them, getting introduced to them. They've been really early on the regenerative, organic, and A2 movements, and putting in, pioneering on that those movements on the dairy side. Um, and we're lucky enough to be super close to them, both based in Northern California. And so we were looking for a dairy supplier. We were looking for a new dairy supplier, and just happened to get introduced to them. It was like, oh,
Nice.
This is perfect.
Yeah.
And so that led. Actually, they were the ones who led us to transition over to a regenerative supply chain.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
So
you were looking for A2 dairy, and then they happened to say like, "Hey, we've got regenerative," and offered that up to you, or were you looking for regenerative and they happened to have A2, and that was a nice benefit?
Uh, honestly, we were looking for organic dairy that was available
Okay.
to us. We in the pandemic, we were working with a dairy supplier who was supplying us organic dairy, um, and they got shut down because of some issues that. And so we were stuck looking for a new supplier. And as a small manufacturer, we have our own factory too. So that's another thing. We're not, putting in a purchase order to a co-packer and letting them deal with all the supply chain issues. We actually need to have someone who can deliver the dairy to us. And so it's very hard as a super new brand to find someone to deliver dairy, organic dairy specifically, at the quantities that we needed, and who'd be willing to grow with us. And so we were sort of scrambling. It's hard to make ice cream if you don't have dairy. And so we got introduced to the Alexanders, and we were originally doing organic pasture raised ice cream. That's sort of what I thought I knew as the best potential, or the best available, sustainable option. And when we talked to them, learned about regenerative, learned about what they're doing, then learned about A2 as well, it just was a no brainer for us to transition and really further our mission.
Nice. Do you feel like that's kind of a core part of your brand now that you wouldn't negotiate in the future for, like, do you feel like now that you've gotten that opportunity, you are a regenerative A2 dairy ice cream company and there's no going back?
Yeah, I do. And as now we're growing and becoming a larger brand, we can uh, continue to just foster and develop a regenerative supply chain and work with farmers and continue to just get more and more farms and farmers able to convert over to regenerative. And that's a huge thing if we can do that. And regenerative agriculture has a lot of benefits to the farmers as well, as far as the amount of what they're able to charge and get paid for their products that they make and grow. So yeah, it's something that we're really proud of.
It's amazing that you were able to find a farm that could help you and hopefully grow with each other a little bit there.
Yeah, I mean, I think a big part of that too, of why we're able even to do that, is because we have our own uh, production facility. So we got very lucky in the very early stages of our business of finding a ice cream factory that was shut down, available for sale, and having that really allows us to source dairy from the suppliers that we want to source from. And when we were trying to just get started, we were talking to a bunch of co-packers, and no one would make organic ice cream for us, for a lot of reasons that get into like the intricacies of dairy processing. But yeah, so it's very hard to just get up and start an organic dairy product.
Yeah, wow, you bought your own ice cream factory, it sounded like. So
Yeah,
that
yeah.
seems like a pretty big jump for a newer brand. Were you able to, maybe it's just a great deal, right time, like your investors or something were interested in that, or how's that working?
It primarily it was a great deal, at a great time. So we just happened to stumble upon a factory that a company was trying to get rid of all their assets, and we were able to get it for a really good price. And so it was just,
Sweet.
yeah, it was a big investment for a new company. on the scale of factories, it's like a tiny investment, like, but um, yeah, it was just an amazing opportunity to be able to get that scale at the same cost that I think it would have cost us to open a really cool brick and mortar location, pretty much.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, one of our clients is just like a local ice cream scoop shop, but then they
Yeah.
were scaling to be a franchise, so they got some investors and built out a whole ice cream factory that would be big enough to fulfill for all these different franchises across the country. And I know how crazy expensive and how long it took to build and all that. So to stumble on to a right size, right scaled ice cream factory at a good deal, a good price or whatever is an amazing win. So congrats on that. That's great.
Thank you. Yeah.
And then a question on the A2. So is that something that a lot of dairy intolerant people know about and seek out? Or are you finding that even people who had a sensitivity, you've got to kind of explain that to them?
It's definitely a newer trend, let's say. It's growing a lot and rapidly. I mean, the difference from when we first started doing this to now, as far as people coming up to us at demos or events and being like, "Oh, you're A2," versus "What's A2?" It's changed a lot. But still, there's tons of education that needs to be done, and it's kind of when you're talking to someone at a demo, let's say at a store, and they're like the target, they're sensitive to dairy, struggle with it a lot. It's a big risk for them to try the product and be like, and trust you. So I'll usually have to explain it and be like, just take a really small bite. And if you feel fine, come back and take a bigger one, and we'll take it slow, baby steps. But it definitely has started to grow a lot in awareness.
Yeah, I can see how you need to baby step people into it, and probably also on your packaging, like sensitivity around exactly how you're talking about it, because it's not like you can claim this is great for people who are literally lactose intolerant or whatever. But it's also sort of better for people who have maybe some sensitivity. So like it's a difficult message to explain, I imagine.
Yeah, and I mean, like, everybody's body is different and everyone will react differently to certain things. So I like to say a lot of people who perceive themselves as lactose intolerant are able to eat our ice cream and feel totally fine. That's not a guarantee, but I've seen it time and time again. So it's, worth a try.
Yeah. Is there like a USDA or whatever FDA claim that's approved for you to be able to say something about A2, like easier to digest, and put an asterisk and explain that on the back panel or something like that?
Yeah, I try to be very careful about making specific health claims because, people's health is a serious thing. And I think the best thing I can say is that we've had a ton of people who've said that it's allowed them to enjoy our ice cream and enjoy ice cream again.
So just kind of like through conversations more than anything, let people know that it might be better for them. And then hopefully once people try it, they'll tell other friends and the word will spread that way.
Yeah, exactly.
Makes sense. Yeah, it's always so risky to make any health claims on packaging with food products, and it takes lots of lawyers, and then every lawyer has a different opinion, and every approval person, like certifier or whomever, has different opinions. And then it gets real messy real soon, and the next thing you know, you've got like 3 paragraphs of legal context just to make one little claim. So it's rough.
Yeah.
Awesome. So obviously you start with your top quality dairy, which makes a lot of sense. And then you were talking about just unique flavor profiles, and you've obviously nerded out on just the right way to make ice cream to bring flavors out. So how would you say, or why would you say your ice cream is so delicious? Because I did get to try it at Expo West too, and it was quite creamy and delicious. But is it mostly because of the better dairy as the starting point, or is it part of your process? Like, again, that local kind of ice cream scoop shop that we've worked with, their secret sauce is that they age their ice creams for a little while to let the flavors mingle, and they use, I think in their particular case, like a lower fat ice cream, so the flavors come out a little bit more instead of you just getting like the dairy flavor. They want the rest of the flavors to come through, and then they age it so that it all melds together, and then they keep all the flavors in their scoop shop in separate sealed containers, so there's no like cross flavor contamination kind of stuff going on. So that's their like secret sauce. But what's your secret sauce for making your product so delicious?
Yeah, I mean the starting point with making ice cream is you're looking at your two percentages, your butterfat percentage and your overrun percentage. Butterfat percentage meaning basically how much fat are you putting in the ice cream, and that comes from how much cream you use. And then overrun is a volume percentage, measuring how much air you whip into the ice cream. So when you're making ice cream, you're taking this fluid mixture, simultaneously freezing it and whipping air into it, and it creates this almost soft servy milkshake kind of product that you then pack into a cup and freeze to harden. So we use a pretty high level of cream, about as high as you'll find for, grocery store type products. And then we whip a pretty low amount of air in there as well. And that's what gives you that really nice creamy mouthfeel. And then, we do the curing time as well to allow those flavors to soak into the base mix and really all blend together. And yeah, I mean, so basically what we're doing is it's pretty simple. I don't know. I think the best food that you make is done simply and with really simple, amazing quality ingredients.
Yeah,
and that's what we're doing. We're taking a pretty simple, basic ice cream base for custard style formula. It's cream, skim milk, egg yolks, cane sugar, and just adding great flavors to it and whipping as little air as makes sense too. And, you get really delicious, high quality ice cream.
Nice. So are you the one that's mostly coming up with the recipes and flavor profiles? If so, how or where do you get your inspiration? Are you just constantly experimenting?
It's definitely a team effort.
Okay.
And I obviously started in the beginning, it was just me, but now we have a few people on our team who contribute there. And for us, our flavors, we want them to, I think, like our newest flavor, peanut butter fudge honeycomb, is a great example of something that feels familiar and unique and a little elevated and sophisticated at the same time. But also indulgent sounding. And yeah, so we're kind of going for that unique combination of factors all in one flavor profile.
That's cool. Have you heard of Salt and Straw out here on the West Coast? Yes, I feel like as you started describing that flavor, it sounded like something you'd find at Salt and Straw, which for anyone who doesn't know them, they make some standard flavor ice creams, but the main draw for them is they're always rotating their menus, and each region that they're in, they kind of localize the menu and maybe partner with local chefs or something like that to come up with stuff. But some of their ice creams are just wacky as heck, right? The first time I went to one, I think I had it was like a duck fat based ice cream with, what was it? Pepper. It was like peppercorn toffee or something like that, and then some sort of like raspberry jam in it. I don't know, just all over the place. Yeah. But it sounded so weird that I had to try it, and it was amazing.
Yeah, no, they definitely push the envelope on flavors and do some really cool stuff there. Which, yeah, you can do more of that in the scoop shop kind of environment versus in the grocery store. It's really interesting how people purchase ice cream differently at a scoop shop versus in this grocery store. But yeah, Salt and Straw does some really, really fun stuff with flavors.
Do you feel like it's just a different purchase occasion, or is it more like retailers are scared? But part of the reason I ask is because we work with a lot of food companies, and more often than not, they're like afraid to do the really bold, interesting flavors, partly because those usually don't sell as well. And I wonder, is it they don't sell as well because a retail customer is not looking for that? Because I know crazy flavor stuff sells really well, and like you said, like a scoop shop or in maybe even online or something. But for whatever reason, when it goes to retail, everything gets blanded down, and it's kind of frustrating because I love crazy food, but it's hard to find it at a grocery store.
I think it's because it's a different shopping occasion, and people have a different mentality when they're making that purchase decision. That's why vanilla is the highest selling flavor in ice cream in the grocery store. But you walk into a scoop shop, you're most likely not just ordering a cone with a scoop of vanilla.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that people just view it differently. And it's not the retailers. I think the retailers are always eager to put new flavors on their shelves and add some variety to their set. But a lot of times people like to experiment and try stuff, but at the end of the day, they like the tried and true. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not, I think the challenge is finding the flavor that is both unique but feels familiar. And that's where I think you can create unique innovations that also are able to repeat.
Yeah, that's interesting. Part of my mind was thinking like maybe when you're in the grocery store, you're thinking more of like everyday and or family. Like this has to be good for everybody. Whereas when you get the crazy wacky ice cream, usually that's more of that sounds good to me, and I might want this once, but I'm not sure if I want this all week or something. So maybe that's why in a scoop shop, you're like, well, I'm just going to eat this all right here. I'm not going to save any of it. Whereas even if you're just buying a small pint that you could pound all on your own, you're probably thinking it would be irresponsible of me not to eat this all in one sitting. So I want a flavor that I can pick at all week and not just on my current flavor whim.
Yeah, no, it totally is. Like it feels like more of an investment, even if they're almost the same price. Like
that's the funny thing.
More of an investment. Yeah.
Yeah, you walk out of something like Salt and Straw and you just paid like $12 for a cone or something, but then $5 at the grocery store sounds too expensive.
Exactly.
My mind is always blown with economic like psychology, right? Where people will completely justify dropping $100 at a bar with a couple friends one night, but they can't justify paying 10 cents more for that organic bell pepper. Exactly. It blows my mind how people kind of play with numbers in their head and what things are valued at.
Yeah, totally.
So we talked about some of the challenges already of just being in the dairy industry in general, but then also like organic dairy and especially now regenerative organic. So I'm just curious, as a impact driven company, what are your biggest challenges that you're facing right now?
I mean, I think there's so many challenges that a lot of businesses have faced over these past couple of years, and supply chain challenges, I think, being probably the biggest one from, it was a challenge, but then also a really lucky silver lining of losing our original dairy supplier and then having to find a new one, getting connected with the Alexanders. But I mean, just dealing with all the supply chain shocks across the board has been a major challenge for us. And then figuring out how to run a manufacturing facility, how to get a factory up and running was a huge challenge. So I think those two things have been, I think, two of the highlights on the challenge side. And then I think looking forward, communicating to customers why our product is maybe more expensive than the super basic conventional product that, and it's just we look at food now as a country so differently. It's like it has to be so cheap, but also really good. made with good ingredients. I'm like, well, you can't have all three of those things. You kind of have to pick two. And
Yeah.
so, um, I think that's something that as we head into a more uh, challenging economic environment, um, how will people still purchase things? Will they still want to purchase sustainably and everything like that?
Yeah.
And I think that there will still. I'm not. I don't think that people are just going to stop buying things that meet their values. But it is a reality that as a premium product, just how do you still get people to purchase the product? And as a new brand too, I mean, we're growing our distribution significantly, and how do you build that awareness, support those retailers, make sure
Right.
people are going in and buying pints.
Yeah, that's good notes, and a good transition to my next thought / question is what the future looks like for Alex, which like I think right now, I could be wrong, but I think right now you're just selling in pints, right? So
Correct.
do you have future expansion plans beyond just more flavors? Like, are you thinking you might have bars, or you might do bigger, bulk containers to get the price per scoop down, or whatever? Or are you thinking you might launch your own scoop shops, or just sell, private label or wholesale or something like that into food service? Like, what is your game plan at the moment?
Right now, our game plan is to just continue to innovate with pints, and there's a lot of fun ideas that we want to explore down the line. But right now, it's about just creating the best ice cream possible.
Nice. And you're mostly, I assume, in retail, but are you selling a lot on your website or other online retailers?
We do have, the bulk of our sales are in retail. We do sell on our website. It's, you know, it's just different selling on the website. You have to pay for shipping and dry ice and all this stuff that comes with mailing someone a frozen product. So yeah, the bulk of our sales are in store.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, I was living in Seattle and never really had much of a hard time finding the products I wanted to find in the grocery stores downtown Seattle. But then during the pandemic, I moved down to Olympia, and I have to say I've been struggling down here. Every time I'm like talking to a new podcast guest or see something, find something at a trade show or whatever, and then when I go to my local stores here, of course they don't have it. Like even if that brand is nationally distributed, even in like a Target or something, I go to my Target here and I can't find it, or my co-op here is so small that they only have so much shelf space. So it's always
Right.
a challenge, but especially with frozen products, I get like not selling a ton of it online, but it's also nice to know for anyone listening here that is an option. Maybe it's not your primary sales channel, but if they want to somewhat unsustainably ship some frozen product around the country and just to try how great your stuff is, then that's an option.
Yeah. We on that note, we also don't use styrofoam for insulating, so we use a biodegradable cooling liner in the box. So
nice.
Trying to be as sustainable as we can, but yeah, it's tough shipping ice cream.
Yeah, that it is. So as we kind of maybe wrap up, I'm curious if you have any advice that you would offer to other impact-driven entrepreneurs.
I would say I think just be prepared for a lot of challenges that come your way, and that's part of it. And be ready to, persevere through that adversity, because it'll come. I mean, just like with any, and it's not that's any entrepreneurship thing or anything that you're trying to do.
Yeah.
And so just being ready for that, and I think find something that powers you through that. And, I'd hope if you're doing something more around impact, it's just the mission and the impact that you're trying to make on the world with what you're doing.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I feel like maybe I have an unhealthy mindset around this. I'm not entirely sure, but I personally feel like anything worth doing is going to be hard to do, by which I mean, if it's easy, then you're not growing, or you're not trying hard enough, or it wasn't really what the world needed. Like if you're not coming up against challenges, then you're not doing anything innovative, new, and necessary for the world, right? So entrepreneurship in general is basically a career of problem solving. But especially when you have the added burden of trying to do everything the right way instead of cutting corners, you're going to have more challenges. So it's almost like pick the hardest path possible and go in that direction. But that's kind of what it is when you're an impact-driven entrepreneur. It's like it fuels you and it's exciting and you get to follow your passion and your purpose, but it is probably the hardest path possible. So I like your advice of just be prepared for those challenges and persevere and keep going through it. And I forget who was talking about this recently, but maybe it must have been a conversation on LinkedIn, I believe. But someone was saying that to really make it, you need to shift your mindset from challenges being a problem and a stress to challenges being something fun that you look forward to solving, right? And granted, I know that like my factory burned down is not a fun challenge to solve, but like the normal everyday challenges of like, shit, I got to figure out how to communicate this A2 thing to consumers, or I got to figure out how I'm going to survive as a more premium product during an economic downturn. Like those are difficult things to do, but if you have the right mindset, they're fun challenges too.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's a challenge that you get to overcome and solve. It's not a problem. And so, it's all about mindset, how you look at it.
For sure. Awesome. Well, I appreciate you persevering and having just the right amount of naivete to jump in and do what I think the world needs. Like I would love all ice cream companies to be following in your footsteps. And if we could flip the economics in this country to making doing things the right way the more affordable thing through subsidies and actually charging the real price for cheap products that are adding to healthcare costs or cutting corners and putting people on welfare or whatever, like we don't pay the true cost of the cheap stuff at the store. But if at some point we could flip that and you pay the true cost of the cheap stuff, and instead we put our subsidies and other things, grants, et cetera, into better for the world companies like yourself, then you would be the cheaper option too, in theory, or at least price equal at that point. And until the world gets to that point, which seems unlikely, I appreciate you going out and doing the right thing and providing the world with what they need. And I wish you all the best and hope that you're able to keep persevering and kick butt out there. And I'm excited to continue trying all your interesting flavors.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Yeah. We're going to keep doing it. And so, awesome. Really appreciate you having me on.
Yeah. Cheers. Thanks for listening. If you'd like to learn more about Alec or his ice cream, visit alecsicecream.com. That's ALECS icecream.com. Subscribe to our podcast and YouTube channel for more innovator interviews, expert advice, and leadership discussions. If you like this episode, leave a heart, thumbs up, or review, and share it with your colleagues. As an ever-evolving show, we also love feedback, so send us your thoughts or ideas for who we should talk to next to evolve@modernspecies.com.